Popular radio host Charlamagne the God giving the Democratic Party a very grim forecast on their 2024 prospects, saying it's sad that the party cannot find anyone better than Biden.
I think that's more indicative of what Democrats aren't doing. And for me, I don't see the bench that the Democrats have. I personally don't see the person that they could put up in 2024 that could really galvanize and energize people. I mean, the fact that Biden is still their safest bet, I think that's sad too.
Charlamagne also thinks Kamala Harris is a total loser, adding that he does not believe the vice president is a viable candidate and would lose against some top Republicans if she is the party's nominee. And liberal outlet Slate.com thinks Joe should straight up abandon his number two. Quote, if Biden runs again, he should pick a new VP. Kamala Harris had her chance. The Democrats need something different. Okay, so let's get rid of the easy question here, Brian. Kamala, she's gone, right?
A little surprising because she went and did his show. Remember, she pretended to
like Snoop or Dre or one of those.
Yeah, and when evidently they didn't have any music out at that time.
Yeah,
and,
she lied.
Right. So she lied about that, and so he picked up on that, and he does not for. He's also not for Pete Buttigieg. He goes, smart guy, but he doesn't think the American people are ready to vote for him. So he says they're without any options. He also said about when it comes down to Trump, he says the problem with Trump is all the investigations and things around him.
Yeah.
He thinks it'll be a big showdown and that DeSantis will win. I don't know where he gets the statement when he says people are sleeping on Ron DeSantis. Everybody's talking about Ron DeSantis. No one's sleeping on him.
Yeah, and Dana, that Charlamagne the God says he believes that both Biden and Kamala would lose to Trump or DeSantis. I mean, he hasn't given up on Trump totally.
So what's interesting is that he is like somebody in the Democratic Party like Van Jones or Bill Maher or James Carville. They say really smart things, really wise things, and then they are wholly ignored by the Democratic Party. And then at the end of an election, they're like, wow, we should have really listened to those guys. I think that's a very sick burn of the vice president. And I imagine that Kamala Harris will announce a full departing of all staff by Saturday and a new team by Monday. That'll be the 7th rendition to see if she can try to figure it out. Again, it's what he's saying, and he knows her. He's talked to her many times, that she's not the one. And so now I kind of wonder if, in a way, the midterms will end up being a little bit of a long-term problem for the Democratic Party, because now President Biden has a little bit of wind at his back, and he's thinking he's going to run again. And I bet this week, and he'll feel like, you know what? I feel pretty good. I'm 80. I just did better than I thought I would do in the midterms. I'm going to run again, instead of giving the Democrats a reason to say, goodbye, let's move on. Now, the Republicans get a lot of talk about being in disarray, and there is that, yes, of course, but the mirror image is quite interesting on the Democratic side, and their bench is so weak. That is the real soft underbelly of their problems.
You know, Harold, 4 congressional Democrats anonymously said that half of the Democrats in Congress would not support Biden. You think that's true?
I don't know. I mean, I was in Congress and people spoke anonymous, and they generally had some sources for doing that. They at least had some fillers out in the party. There's no doubt that 4 weeks ago, there was a wide feeling or growing feeling amongst at least the Democrat kind of elite class that Biden should seriously consider not running. And I think that group thought that the midterms would turn out poorly. The midterms didn't turn out as poorly as some thought. Now, and as a result, there's some who think that maybe President Biden and Vice President Harris may decide that they've had a good run here. Maybe they ought to open a door for someone else, as Nancy Pelosi has done. The challenge is what's been said. The bench is not readily apparent. Look, I question anybody who has God in their name who's not a God, but I think the guy makes him, he's entitled to his opinion, and he has an interesting opinion. He probably has credibility on some of this because of the things that I think, Brian, you and Dana shared. He was supportive of Vice President Harris and said that it was one of the best things that President Biden did was choosing her. Now he's being critical. I think, again, this is one of the lessons Democrats should take from this. We should not believe for any moment that we should not be serious about crime and the border. We should not believe for any moment that we should not be serious about energy, and should not be deluded into believing we should not think more creatively about how to invigorate Main Street America and small business in America. And as a result, that may mean we need new personnel. At this moment, though, as much as it may be mirrored where we have these challenges, Dana, Democrats, Biden feels better about his chances than Trump, DeSantis, Haley, Scott, and we can go down the list. Pompeo. I heard something Pompeo said today about Randy Weingarten that was unbelievable to me. But look, we're going to get a chance to see this thing play out.
Jesse, wrap it up.
Well, he does have things going for him. He just kept the Senate, and he can raise a lot of money. And he's well-liked by corporate America.
You're talking about President Biden?
I'm talking about President Biden. And he's an incumbent, which is hard to beat. But on the other hand, his legislative agenda is totally shot now that the Republicans have the House. They're going to crank up investigations and expose his family finances and corruption. And people have never seen that before. And he may say, you know, he matches up well against Trump, but we don't have COVID this time in 2024. And he does not match up well against Ron DeSantis. So it's whether or not Joe Biden's going to be able to campaign because of his health. And if he does campaign, how does he do that and also stay home in Delaware? You have to actually go to swing states when you're running a general.
People don't show up.
Right. So is it going to be the pro-Biden voter that comes out, or is it the anti-Trump? Really, that's the thing. But I wanted to discuss King Charlamagne, where the god took the name from. This guy has an amazing family tree. Are you ready? His children, Pepin the Hunchback, Charles the Younger, siblings, Charlamagne Gisela, parents, Pepin the Short, grandchild, Charles the Bald. Took over all of Europe, Holy Roman Empire. That's where he got it from.
Thank you, Jesse.
You're welcome.
Ahead, the White House is ready to rumble over Hunter Biden investigations as one media outlet finally admits the lap.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.